This lecture accompanies the PowerPoints in the reading for Chapter 12, Psychomotor Stimulants, and of course that's cocaine, to include crack amphetamines, to include meth, and related drugs, and along with the amphetamine category is going to be the drugs that are being prescribed and widely abused for ADHD. We'll talk a little bit about some drugs that were used for weight control. One, the big player has been outlawed in its use, but of course there's some variations. We'll talk about meth, we'll talk about crack, we'll talk about cocaine, we'll talk about all those sorts of things that are included in this category of stimulants. And of course, like every other chapter, your book starts off with a background. Cocaine comes from a naturally growing shrub, mostly found in South America, and the use dates back a very, very, very long time. Your book references sort of Incans chewing this for obviously during times of battle, during times of war, going forward. Cocaine was given as a prescription for mouth ache. So for infants, when they were teething, it was often given. It was mixed in Coca-Cola very early on. And as a matter of fact, that was touted as sort of an alternative for alcohol. So if you had a problem with alcohol, if you had a drinking problem, similarly to using heroin early on, people were encouraged to drink Coca-Cola, which had cocaine in it. Things we didn't know a long, long, long time ago. I kind of wonder sometimes when I think about things like this, what our current society will look like, let's say 40, 50, 60, 70 years from now, and as we reflect upon the things that we're doing now that we didn't know. But I digress. Relevant to us, Freud was a very notable cocaine user. He was one of it was pretty well known that he was divulging in cocaine use, and rumor has it even sort of suggested and encouraged his clients or his patients, he would call them patients, to use it. Your book doesn't go into the cocaine, and that's not super relevant for us, obviously. Physicians, but what you do need to know is that similarly to opiates with just sort of minor modifications, structure and the makeup, you can have some different responses and different reactions. Cocaine very much directly affects the dopamine neurotransmitter and dopamine receptor sites. Please pay attention to that. And as a matter of fact, on page 397, 395, yep, so mechanisms of cocaine action, 395, 396, 397, it talks about the dopamine transporter, specifically the dopaminergic system and how that works. And the intake and excess amount of dopamine that is flooded in one's system when someone uses a stimulant, uses cocaine, is an example we use a lot in trying to describe sort of the rebound effect and trying to describe tolerance and withdrawal, and more so withdrawal with cocaine. Withdrawal of cocaine can be pretty clear and pretty obvious. We'll get into that in a second, but please make sure in this first section that you're looking into that, the dopamine system and the influx of dopamine when one uses, and then the long of the short story, and then the fact that your brain says, hey, I have too much dopamine, I need to sort of pull back on producing this neurotransmitter, and then your brain has that rebound effect in that it says, hey, now I don't have enough, but I have to sort of account for that. Cocaine can be taken orally. It can be snorted, as that's sort of common with cocaine. It can be smoked, as in as it does with crack, IV, of course, and methamphetamine as well. So a wide range of ways to ingest this. And then, of course, smoking an IV, as is typical and as you've known, is the fastest way to get to feel the effects. So that's like the most rapid absorption. You can see here sort of the effects of stimulant ingestion is increased alertness, heightened arousal, and excitement, behavioral excitement. It is a stimulant. So if you think about just that word stimulant, it stimulates everything. It speeds everything up. Speeds up your respiration, speeds up your pulse, speeds up your energy, speeds up your talk, speeds up your digestion, speeds up your metabolism, which is why, as we'll talk in a little bit, why it was so widely used for weight control. Let's see, going into those behavioral, and then specific for us, if you look on page 398, it starts talking about cocaine stimulates mood and behavior. So this is, let me see if I can get to that page because I'm really bad at moving these along as we talk. So we're talking about crack there. Yeah, I apologize. I'm not very good at moving these as I talk. I just kind of talk. If we had an in-person class, I would just be lecturing. Well, there's a little bit of what crack might look like. Let's see. Where are we? Okay, now we're talking about, or those we're talking about. Okay, so here we go. So here's some behavioral effects. So you can see here's the effects when taking it and the severe effects. So you can see that there's this connection between consuming a stimulant and the development of a possible mood disorder, particularly when using it regularly, anxiety, frustration, anger, and aggression. And then, of course, the flip side of that, when we start talking about withdrawal, of course, we're going to look at the opposite effects of that. So you can see this chart here is pretty descriptive of the effects of use. You can see mild to moderate effects, mood amplification. And that's both ways. That's not just happy mood. That's also sort of an amplification in a negative mood. More energy. Obviously, this is going to cause sleep disturbances, motor excitement and restlessness. So we're talking about, gross motor skills. How are you moving? Talkativeness, pressure of speech, hyperactive ideation, increased sexual interest. This is important just because it increases sexual interest does not necessarily mean that your ability to perform is heightened or increased or is better, which is often, oftentimes you'll hear folks say they take it, particularly when we talk about meth and sex, that it can sort of increase sexual prowess, but that's not necessarily, it might increase the interest, it might increase the desire and the want, but it doesn't necessarily increase or help out the mechanism associated with sex. Anger, verbal aggression, mild to moderate anorexia, of course, because your whole system is being sped up, so your digestive system is also sped up, and your metabolism, you're not as hungry, and when you do eat, you kind of burn it, but you're really just not as hungry. And then an inflated self-esteem, and you'll find this a lot. This is quite interesting, sort of being a bit gregarious or very gregarious or very just sort of full of themselves. And then these severe effects. This is when someone's been using a lot and for quite some times. And if you look down, this is just you can tell that it just increases in severity, disjointed flight of ideas. So now you have someone who's speaking about things that are not necessarily connected and speaking in a way that doesn't make a lot of sense. And then, of course, the opposite, decreased sexual interest, possible extreme violence. You see this a lot with those who smoke meth and those who smoke crack. Intense rage, intense violence, and really, oftentimes not even after the fact, really being aware of what was going on or what was happening, and total anorexia, and then delusions of grandiosity. This is also often seen in excessive cocaine use, but really with crack and methamphetamine a lot. I worked with a client who did some pretty violent and pretty criminal, obviously. I say obviously, I don't know why I said obviously, but some pretty violent and pretty criminal activities, and engaged in some pretty bizarre behavior while smoking crack, a lot of which got him arrested, almost all of which got him hospitalized after he was arrested. And then, in recovery, you would never know that his sort of mental capacity was diminished to such a degree. You would never know that, he had the capability of engaging in such aggressive, violent, and detached sorts of behaviors. But anyway, so just again, following along with your book. So here we're talking about reinforcers, and like other substances, the pull to not feel the withdrawal effects can certainly be a reinforcer for not wanting to stop using. Let me keep going on here. Oh, did I go the opposite way? I sure did. I apologize. I'm going the wrong way. Yeah, here's some really negative side effects. So we're talking about seizures. We're talking about heart attacks, stroke, hemorrhaging. This is obviously some really, 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 really bad stuff. And when folks are on stimulant binges, of course, they're more at risk for these types of pretty extreme physiological or physical consequences. Let's see. I want to make sure that I touch on things in the short amount of time that I like to keep these videos. Cocaine or stimulant use is pretty interesting, and seeing someone in the throes of use, whether it's a cocaine binge, or they've been smoking crack, or methamphetamine use, is pretty interesting. I do want to get to, so if you start going down to 409, it starts talking about interventions. There's not at this time medication specifically, so medication assisted treatment, where there's not specifically medication that we're using for stimulant dependence. Certainly medication can be prescribed for any mood disorders that may have been caused by, or in cases where a mood disorder existed prior, exacerbated by stimulant use. They mentioned this cocaine vaccine, although, we don't really know, as evidenced by the very small paragraph here, we don't really have a lot of evidence for that. But, like other substances, and like we try to collectively use as many therapies and interventions as possible, we look at behavioral and sort of counseling interventions. Your book talks about CBT, obviously, relapse prevention. There is a 12-step program specifically for stimulant use, Cocaine Anonymous, or CA, similarly to opiates with yeah, sorry, opiates, or any other narcotic, Narcotics Anonymous.